so much for checking us out here at Harvest Online. We're so glad that you have made us a part of your day whenever and wherever you're watching from. If I look a little wet, it's because it is pouring down rain here in South Carolina as we've got a tropical storm coming through. And so we are coming to you and recording it here today as it's pouring down rain outside. So that's kind of a little fun fact behind the curtain. Harvest Church exists so that all people may know Jesus and grow with Him. And we would love it if you would click that subscribe button right there and subscribe, and you can get all of our content that we have. We do have some new stuff that I think is coming up in the fall with some podcasts and things like that, so we hope that you'll tune in for that. And we certainly hope that you have been enjoying the Psalms of Ascent as we have been rolling through them. And today we're in Psalm 131. The reason they're called the Psalms of Ascent is because these are Psalms, these are 14 Psalms from Psalm 120 to Psalm 134, that the nation of Israel would recite and sing as they are making their trek up into the holy city, as they would come into the city of Jerusalem that was set in the hills for the various feasts of the year. And so today is Psalm 131. Now, here's the thing about our faith is that it requires constant maintenance. It's just kind of like your car, it's like your house, it's like your yard, right? There's always maintenance to do. There's always something around the house to do. The other day, I had to get this spray to kind of spray on the springs of our garage doors there's maintenance there, right? You got to wash your car, you got to cut your grass, you got to do those types of things. And so, so is our faith. It requires regular maintenance, right? Because if you ever want to grow something, if you ever want to grow your faith, you got to have maintenance. If you ever want to grow something, it requires maintenance as well, right? If you have a garden, you have to constantly work in your garden and maintain it. If you have flowers that you want to grow, you have to maintain them, right? And so it requires maintenance. Our faith does, just like pretty much everything else. And it also requires pruning, because if you're going to grow a healthy flower, you got to prune it. If you're going to grow healthy grass, you got to cut it. In order to grow healthy bushes, you got to shape them. They got to be trimmed. And the same is true of personal growth, that pruning must occur for growth to happen. You have to prune the good to get to the great. And so to an outsider, someone who doesn't know how growth works, it might look counterproductive when you start pruning things. They might think, but if you want it to grow, why are you cutting it? You want your bushes to grow, why are you trimming them? You want your grass to grow, why are you cutting it? You want something to grow, why are you getting rid of it? But actually, it takes the cutting and the pruning to do it. And in our faith, or when it requires with our faith, Psalm 131 is a maintenance psalm. It is a psalm that is kind of addressing a couple of things that we need to be aware of and that we must prune. It is functional, Psalm 131, to the person of faith as pruning is functional to the gardener. It gets rid of that looks good and reduces it so that we can allow the great to form, right? And the great to form in our spiritual walk is that closeness and that intimacy between us and the Lord. And the two things that Psalm 131 kind of addresses and talks to us about pruning away comes in the area of two things that we put our hope in. One of them is unruly ambition, and the other is infantile dependency. This is a Psalm of David, and there are two possible occasions for his writing this. The first, when Saul hunted David while David was being accused of ambition for the throne of Israel. And the second, David's response to Michal, his wife, when she accused him of being vulgar and undignified as he danced in the process of bringing the Ark of the Covenant into Jerusalem. And so whatever the occasion of the writing, the psalm is a short but beautiful denial of pride, arrogance, and selfish ambition. And at the end, in verse 3, because it's only 3 verses, David is going to show us exactly where we're to put our hope in. It's not necessarily dependence on ourselves. It's not necessarily an ambition in what we can achieve. We're to put our hope somewhere else. Charles Spurgeon, a famous pastor, writer, he said this: Psalm 131 is one of the shortest psalms to read, but it's one of the longest psalms to learn. And I think it's very, very interesting as we dive into Psalm 131 that he said that about it, because I think it's very true. Here's what David writes. He says, "O Lord, my heart is not lifted up. My eyes are not raised too high. I do not occupy myself with things too great and too marvelous for me. But I have calmed and quieted my soul like a weaned child with its mother. Like a weaned child is my soul within me." And then in verse 3, here's where he talks about where we put our hope. David says to the nation of Israel, "O Israel, hope in the Lord from this time forth and evermore." So our hope is in the Lord. So let's talk a little bit about this psalm. "O Lord, my heart is not lifted up, my eyes are not raised too high. I do not occupy myself with things too great and too marvelous for me." When we read this psalm, it makes me think of Western ambition, meaning Western cultural ambition. The temptation of ambition that flourishes in Western civilization, especially in America. Our culture rewards ambition without any qualification. The words that describe ambition and describe our culture are this: expansion, fame, and acquisition. Everybody wants more. Everybody wants to be at the top. No matter what it is the top of, it don't matter. Just as long as we're at the top, we want to be admired. That's kind of our culture. And whatever it takes to get there, we are going to try it. However, this idea of ambition, this idea of more, this idea of pridefulness is the oldest sin in the book. Lucifer cast out of heaven, wanting to be God, ambition and pride. Adam thrown out of heaven, enticed he and Eve with, if you eat this fruit, you'll be like God, right? Knowing good from evil, ambition and pride. The only thing that is new in this area of ambition is the admiration of it and the approval that it receives in our culture. Doesn't matter how you get there, just get there. And when you get there, get more. That's kind of our culture. It's reckless. It's this like arrogant, prideful, anything goes, no matter what, the end justifies the means type of culture. But one of the things that we have to know is that as we are trying to walk a life of faith, as we're trying to follow Jesus, that unruly arrogance is not the same as faithful aspiration. They are two completely different things. And we're going to get there at the end, and we're going to talk about the difference between the two. When you think about ambition, ambition and Babel go together. The root cause of ambition and pride lead us to build our own towers of Babel, where we can step back and marvel at what we've accomplished and achieved and done. We revel in our brilliance, and we ultimately lead ourselves into an infantile dependency on ourself. Childish, but not childlike. Childish in the fact that we believe that we are enough, that what we have is enough, that what our skill set is enough. You know, one of my wife's least favorite sayings is, "You are enough." She's like, "No, you're not enough. We're not enough. Not on any stretch of the imagination. We need a lot of help, and that help comes from the Lord that we need it, right?" But our society has that idea that with enough achievement, enough likes, more bragging, more rewards, more seeking, ruthless ambition, we might not only fool others, but ourselves into believing that we can depend on ourselves to get us through life. And here's David writing a simple song to declare and to communicate we actually can't. Our hope needs to be in the Lord. He continues, Oh Lord, my heart, and that's what he says in verse 1, my heart is not lifted up. My eyes are not raised too high. I do not occupy myself with things too great and too marvelous for me. David is giving a posture of humility, of understanding his limitations and his place in life, and understanding that there are things that are far beyond his understanding, things far beyond his reach, things far beyond his ability to achieve them. And he's communicating, my hope cannot be in myself, right? And in this moment, David is declaring he's in a humble state and that his hope needs to be in the Lord. Now, when we talk about childish dependency, it's not the same as childlike trust. So in verse 2, he says this, but I have calmed and quieted my soul like a weaned child with its mother, like a weaned child is my soul within me. Instead of proud pursuits, David determined to find a satisfaction and serenity of soul in the contentment in the presence of God and his works. Those who feel constantly driven to do and achieve more in their relationship with God should learn some of what David has learned. David phrased this with an emphasis on what he did, right? God didn't do it for him. God used the operation of David's choice, and we must choose to calm and quiet our soul, meaning that in this moment, in this psalm, what David is declaring is that he has made the choice to calm and quiet his soul. He has made the choice, like a weaned child with its mother, to just sit in the comfort and in the presence like a child does with its mother, that he has now is sitting in the comfort and in the presence of the Lord his God, right? It's his humble desire to draw near to God that has put him in the place where he can quiet his soul. It's I love this verse. Actually, like for 3 weeks in a row, this was a verse that really spoke to me. If I got anxious, if I got worrisome, if I got whatever, I would repeat this. But I have calmed and quieted my soul like a weaned child with its mother, like a weaned child is my soul within me. It was a reminder to me that I could just say a prayer, and whatever may have come to mind that I was anxious about, whatever I may have been worried about, whatever I may have been fretting about, whatever may have gone wrong or something, it was a reminder to me that I could just say, God, I'm going to give you this situation, and I can just sit and let you handle it. I can just sit and let you worry about it. I can just sit in your presence and you can just take care of it. David is showing us another posture of humility. So when we look at this, we have kind of two areas that have two differences, right? If you can talk about like versus someone, like two different things going against each other. The first is unruly arrogance versus faithful aspiration. Unruly arrogance is driven by self. It's self-motivated, self-initiated, and self-rewarding. Faithful aspiration is driven by calling that is backed up by gifting. It is saying that I have a call to do this. This is what God has placed me here to do. And not only that, but he has also gifted me to do it. Actually, my capability of doing it doesn't come from myself. It's him giving me the capability to do it. If you and I are driven by unruly arrogance, we will never be content because it'll never be enough. That award will never be enough. That amount of money will never be enough. Those amount of likes will never be enough. It'll never be enough. We'll have to keep going and keep going and keep going. But if you'll never have enough, you'll never achieve enough because you'll always be seeking, and here's where it comes from, validation when you can't find it, and you will find those other areas of validation, and those become idols. Because idols feed self. But if we are driven by faithful aspiration, while the work will never be complete, we will find contentment because our identity is not at stake, because we are living for someone else other than ourselves. One of the things we have to understand is that unruly arrogance, this idea that's unruly arrogance and unruly ambition, is really motivated by self. At the heart of the achievement is me and what validation I can get from it. The difference between that and faithful aspiration is this idea that when we're going after something that we've been called to, the calling is greater than self because it calls us to deny self because it's for something greater than self. The second thing that we have in these Psalms that we have to wrestle with, that we have to prune, that we have to maintain and have maintenance on in our walk with God is childish dependency versus childlike trust. Childish is silly and immature. So when we have childish dependency on ourselves, we are being silly and immature. But a childlike trust is an invitation to come to God freely in faith and love. It's like when a kid wakes up at night frightened by a dream. Do they run to themselves or do they run to their parents? They trust their parents. They know their parents are going to protect them. They know their parents want the best for them. They know their parents are going to comfort them. It is a voluntary trust. It is like immediate. This thing happened and I'm afraid. Where do I run to? To the person that can give me comfort. It's a childlike trust. What David is communicating to us is that when we get in those moments, we don't have to be childish in our dependency on ourselves to get us out of the situation. We can have a childlike trust and sit in the presence of God and bring Him the problems that we have, and He will take care of it for us. A childlike trust is trusting in the Lord. If you want me to have it, I'll have it. I'll work hard, but I'll be content with what you give me because I recognize I deserve nothing. I might be afraid and anxious, but I recognize I can come to you and you can bring me comfort, just like the weaned child that David talks about in verse 2. And here's how David finishes. He says, "O Israel, hope in the Lord from this time forth and forevermore." And I think that that's something that's applicable to Israel. And it's applicable to us, that our hope is in the Lord. And that when we're reading this psalm, one of the things that David is trying to write to us as we are kind of maintaining this relationship with God is that sometimes we're going to have to prune some things from our life. We're going to have to do some maintenance in our walk. And a lot of times it's going to come around the area of pride and this like ambitious, like blind ambition that we just got to achieve and do more. And we're going to have to prune this idea of this childish like dependency on ourselves. And that we're basically going to have to put our hope in the Lord and allow Him to handle the things that we can't handle, to see the things that we can't see, to call us to the things that we don't want to do, and to provide comfort and peace when we need it. And so he finishes it with just a very simple statement, but something that is really, really practical and something that we can ask ourselves. He says, hope in the Lord. And so that's the question is, where's your hope? Who is your hope in? And when you kind of follow that trail, you can realize, is my hope in myself and my skills and what I've accomplished and what I can get myself out of and my smarts, or is my hope in the Lord? And what David would say to me and to you is, if we're gonna have a robust relationship with Jesus, put your hope in the Lord, because He's never gonna fail you and He's always gonna be there because He's completely faithful. God bless you.